Okay. Well, I tell you what, why don't we get going here? A couple things. One is at any time Delegate Pasteur's aide comes, we can have her introduce. But I think there are some other people, some people have not been on our meetings, so I'd like to have them be introduced. But maybe we should go around and start with. I'm looking at my screen. Start with. Well, Ainsley, why don't you start, and then we go to John Feaster, and then John can introduce. Okay. So Ainsley, just for the new people, you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, I think we all know each other, but I'm Ainsley. I am a staff person at GoCap. I'm staffing this commission. John, if you want to go next.
Sure. John Feaster. I am the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Maryland Department of Labor, Division of Workforce Development and Adult Learning. Rochelle?
Good morning. I'm Rochelle Rubin, the Director of Correctional Education in the Department of Labor.
Welcome. Okay, so but Judith, may you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Judy Lichtenberg. I teach at JCI regularly and have taught at Patuxent, the DC jail. I'm a retired professor of philosophy at Georgetown. I work with Major and Prepare.
Okay, great. The next person I see on my screen is Danielle.
Danielle Cox, Director of Education. I'm sitting on the commission as Secretary Scrubs designee.
Terrific. Delegate Pasteur, I see you next.
Good morning. I'm Delegate Cheryl Pasteur. I represent Baltimore County District 11A.
Thank you. Next on my screen is Ann.
Hi, I am Ann Pack. I am a co-founder and director of advocacy of Prepare. We do parole education support and reentry pre and post-release support.
Thank you. Looking at the list are Charles Adams.
Hey, good morning. Charles Adams, the Executive Director of the Bowie State Prison Education Program.
Thank you. Looking, Jamal Freeman.
Hello, my name is Jamal Freeman. Used to be incarcerated individual. Sorry, just woke up here, and master's advanced standing student. And I will call Richard Gibson.
Okay.
Hello, good morning. I'm Richard Gibson. I'm actually a retired deputy police chief from Westminster. Prior to that, I retired at the rank of major with the Baltimore Police Department. Up until 3 months ago, I was with the Department of Public Safety Correctional Services, overseeing background investigations for incoming employees. I'm currently the chief of insurance fraud investigations for the Maryland Insurance Administration.
Okay, welcome, because I think this is your very first meeting, and we just really appreciate having a good representation from security end of the business. Thank you so much. I think there's Riley Donahue.
Hi, good morning. I'm the new Chief of Staff for Delegate Cheryl Pasteur. I am a UMBC master's student in public policy and a former Division I women's basketball player.
Oh, wow.
I do want her to tell you what her master's program is.
Please.
So I'm working on my master's thesis in figuring out, it's focusing on how property tax, it fuels the school to prison pipeline.
Wow, that's interesting. That would be really interesting to see connections there. I think that's everybody that's here. Is anybody who I don't see on the list on that hasn't been introduced? Go ahead and do so, please.
I think that's it.
Okay, terrific. So we can go back to our agenda for today, and thank you all. this is, for those who are new, just a quick explanation. The commission was established, and many of you are on the commission. There are like 25 members, and so the commission, the law that created a commission to look at reforming, improving the delivery system for prison education, had a group called the Stakeholders Group, Advisory Stakeholders Group. We subsumed a group that was on the governor's Maryland Equitable Justice Coalition, a group of people who are involved with correctional education, who Judith was chairing for MAJC. And so we subsumed them as the working group, since they were already beginning to do a lot of the work that we were talking about. So many of you are not on the commission, but are on the working group. The work of there's 3 working groups. This one, ABE, GED, and special education. There's a separate higher education group and a separate career technology and workforce improvement group, and the development group, I should say. And so those 2 groups meet, and they've been doing kind of the background work for the commission under the approval of the commission. So all the work that this group is doing pertains primarily to academic programming, starting with basic literacy through high school graduation, and it includes special ed, and so that's the primary thing we're looking at. And so with that in mind, if there are any questions about what this group is up to, but we're really looking to issues that we want to pursue and find out, get some more information, with an eye towards making improvements in the system. We are trying to look at this in a very objective way, that everybody that's involved, from my viewpoint at least, in criminal justice work is trying to do a good job. And given the typical kind of stuff, many of you have worked for government, as I had in the past, it really is good to have somebody kind of look over us once in a while and say, did you think of this or think of that? So this is not a vindictive group. It's a group trying to figure out what's the best way to provide education in prisons. We all know if people go through educational programs while they're incarcerated, the research has been quite definitive that they recidivate at a much lower rate, and as a result, save money in the future criminal justice costs. And we have many people on the commission and on this work group who have worked in the system. We have people who have been through the system, they're returning citizens. We have a good cross section of all the agencies involved: public safety, labor, the legislature, et cetera. And so we hope that this will yield excellent recommendations back to the legislature for improvement of programs. So that's what we're all about. So are there any questions on what we would be doing, or what our committee is involved with? Because some of you may have some other things that you think are related. They may well be, so we should bring them into this discussion. Are there any thoughts or any things that you would like to share? Any of you? I'm not good at keeping track of who raises their hand, and I ask Ainsley to do that once in a while. So if you're not being heard, don't worry about butting in and saying, "Can I say something?" All right. You're not. I want this to be a very relaxed discussion, and don't want to make it too formal. So did everybody see the minutes from the last March meeting? Are there any? Here's up on the screen now. Are there any additions or edits or whatever to these minutes? We keep them. We also videotape these meetings, and so if anybody has an objection to that, they should let us know. But we're strictly doing it to make sure that our minutes are accurate. So, anybody have any suggestions, or would somebody entertain asking for the approval of the minutes? Don't all jump in at once.
I'll approve the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, and if there's any objections, no objections, then that's the minutes are approved. and we'll go to the legislative updates. HB 877. This bill was passed and signed by the governor, and in effect, it extends the termination date of the commission by 3 years. It would have terminated at the end of 2026. So now it goes to 2029. Is that correct, Ainsley?
So it would have terminated at the end of this year. We would have to submit a final report by January 1st of next year. So this moves the interim report down or back to, in the future, to June 1st of 2028, and that final report to January 1st of 2029. So
Yeah.
it would basically end us at the end of 2028.
Yeah, I think actually, although the report was due January 1st, the commission itself was extended, I think, for another 6 months. But I mean, that's kind of irrelevant right now for our discussion. But in any case, I had discussions with the delegate office, and I want to get things in writing from them. So I've asked them. The delegate would like us to continue with the interim report and the final report that is in the original law, and then do other reports in the future, and we could get some more clarification on that. We are going to continue with the idea that we'll put together a 5 or 10 page interim report this June and submit that to the delegate and to whoever else, the governor's office, and then we would proceed with the commission doing the final report, and we'd like to try to do it by November. The delegate's office would like to see what we have to recommend in case there's something that they could put into legislation. And so I want to get a written clarification from the delegate's office, Delegate Ampry, about this, so just so that we have guidance, direct guidance from. And are there any other thoughts or ideas about HB 877 or questions?
I have a question. So does this extend the PEDR to June 30th of 2028? Is it December 31st, 2028?
Do we have a specific in the okay, here's the law. And I asked Ainsley, she should send out a copy of this to everybody. So here's at the end here, January 1st, 2029. So there'll be a final report.
Gotcha. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
January
right.
1st, 2029. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for asking the question. We need to make sure we understand everything here. Okay.
Anne has her hand up.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So how are we reporting our findings, or are our findings being utilized before 2028? Because that seems like to wait 3 years for us to tell anyone anything seems excessive. Like the things that we're talking about today won't be current any longer.
Exactly. That's a good question. And so what I'm asking the delegates Ampry, I've been having conversations with Ian Genovese, the chief of staff, and I will give you whatever our discussions are in writing. I want to get that in writing, because I do agree that, we have a big hiatus there. So what happens? And then, as you say, things get old and issues change.
I was just going to add to that. I mean, why do we need 3 or 4 years? This seems like a way of just postponing action, or it certainly could be interpreted that way.
Yeah, and I want to get it because the delegate was the one who came up with this. I really had nothing to do with the extension of this bill, and then we got involved with discussions when they started asking us what we're doing, and so we need some clarification. And I think the delegate, since it was the best person to do that, and it may actually take some clarification in the next session with some more language that they put into another bill. But I think the points that you're making, when I contact, we can get the delegates, chief of staff, or even the delegate on a future meeting to talk about this. and make apparent to him what or what the issues may be with having it this long. I think there's an idea that he, from my discussion, that we should take a good look at this programming that's going on in general, but education in particular, to make improvements. And I think that's the desire of there's no end goal. Is asking the commission to come up with what those recommendations may be. I don't think the delegate has any particular, but I can't really speak for him, any particular goal in mind, but he may. But let's try to get him on and discuss it, at least, especially if we can, in person, for maybe the next commission meeting. I don't know. Let's see. And if not, to meet with us at the ABE GED special ed meeting. Okay. Any? Yes. Go ahead. Delegate, please.
Yes, thank you. I don't want to speak completely for Delegate Ambry, but we know that there are some evolving things that are happening. So to conclude, we've seen just in this session that there are holes in some of our past legislation, and that need to be filled and handled. And knowing that my second look bill, for example, did pass both chambers. I don't know what the governor is going to do, but it did pass both chambers, and we're going to be committed to that. And a major piece of that is education, the things about which we're speaking here. So it's to put an end at this point so early on while we're still making changes could ultimately have its own unintended consequence. So I do think it's a good idea to extend, but I do think that some of the things that are about now need to happen, and I'm sure that's how Delegate Ambry sees it. So that it's an ongoing process, and it's going to grow, and that work of the committee, the commission, and the advocates will not stop in another year or so. So it does need to have a future.
Thank you. And those who aren't familiar, there are two other delegates on the commission as well. And having you, delegate, and the other two is just terrific, because it really gives us a feel for the overall criminal justice efforts with the legislature. So thank you.
Dr. Stewart, can I add something as well?
Absolutely.
So I will say that we have the benefit of actually having the folks that run this particular program involved in these commissions and work groups. I'm sure that as we go along, we'll find some, I hate to use I feel like I overuse the word low-hanging fruit, but I feel like we're going to find solutions to things that are easy to implement. And please understand that we have the ability to implement whatever we feel like we need to implement as we go along, as long as it makes sense, certainly within our current policies, procedures, and the law. I would imagine that there are going to be some things that this commission wants to implement that are subjective, that really should be submitted in a report and decided upon by the General Assembly or the others who actually commissioned this work group. So just so you know, we don't necessarily have to wait to implement any of the solutions that we come up with through this next 2 or 3 or 4 years that we're all together. So I wanted you to know that we're here, we're open, we're receptive, and if there's anything that we can implement as we go along, we certainly will.
I appreciate that, and I can't speak for public safety, but I Don, you may want to have a comment on that, but yeah, there's things we discover that we just all of a sudden, hey, we should do something about that, because it's not always so obvious to people working in the field what's going on. If you get people together and start discussing, then you come up with some better ideas, and that's hopefully this commission will be a positive force. We're not going out headhunting for anything. We're trying to make a better program and reach more people. As I said earlier, that and to in other situations with this commission, half the people that come into the prison, at least half, need education, job preparation, at least half of them, because they haven't finished school, or they did very poorly in school, or they haven't gotten the job prep beforehand, or don't know what they want to do career-wise. And we're only reaching about 10% of those people who are incarcerated 18 months or more, according to the statistics that we do have, the rough measures we do have. So we're not reaching many people. And if we could double the amount of people we're reaching, it would be terrific. Also, as you mentioned, John, before, some of the low-hanging fruit is we're not getting enough chair time for a lot of people because of closures that have to do often with just officer shortages. And when you have a person going to school once a week or once every other week, in some cases, we had some institutions only 80% of the time the school is closed. They're not going to make progress because they're not continuing on a daily basis like they should. So there may be things that we can do, figure out to improve those things, and that we bring up to public safety and Department of Labor. So, yeah, we're looking at long term, we're looking at short term, and you're right. Let's do those things that we can do. Not me as a commissioner. I mean, we're advisory, but you, labor and public safety, getting together to do something to improve it. So, because it'd be nice to put in a report, hey, these are the things we did as a commission that we're able to effectuate through public safety and dollar just through our discussions. I think that's part of it, would be a good thing in the report, to show people that this is not a resistance, this is a cooperation. Okay? Go ahead, Delegate, please.
Yeah, I just want to throw out, just based on the conversation from the two of you, or inspired by the two of you. One of the things that is often asked is, why did we have this bill? That's the question. What has it done? Why are we continuing it? And if there's any funding connected to it, why are we putting money into this? So if you can see in real time the impact and the effect, that answers the questions. It stems a whole lot of extraneous conversation. So this is important to start putting in some things that can be done now. And where does it lead us? It gives us fodder for asking for other things. This is just open door, which is why I wanted you to hear what Raleigh's master's title is, because it's the same piece. We're missing the point. We're missing the journey, if you will. We are the journey. And I have to tell you, I have folks now that I know who are incarcerated, who under other circumstances would qualify for a number of things, particularly my second look, but can't because there's not enough of that school time and that background that they need to have. So we're disenfranchising them even more by not moving forward with this. So this is critical. What we're doing is critical to make sure that we're doing what is right and what is good for reentry down the road. If there's no road, they can't get to the end.
Well, that's terrific. I love a bigger goal that we're describing here in our discussions, rather than getting lost in the forest, and let's always keep in mind where we're headed. So, are there any more conversations on HB 877? I'll get clarification. I'll get written clarification and send that out to everybody from the delegate's office, and see if we can at least get the chief of staff, if not the delegate, on one of the meetings, the next meetings. And if you can't make the commission meeting, maybe you can make, like this ABE meeting, which is every 2 weeks. Okay. The next bill.
Anne has her hand up.
Pardon? Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, the very comments that were just made are why I think it's so important that we have some kind of yearly report, because I think that if you don't celebrate those successes as part of the commission, they're not going to be recognized as something that was produced by the commission. So if we just talk about stuff for 3 years and it gets done, and that's fantastic because we have so much buy-in, and I think that's great. If we don't put out a yearly document like other boards and commissions, people are going to say, oh, great, look, labor's getting it together. DPSCS is getting it together. Things are moving forward, but they're not going to recognize the role the commission played in that. They're not going to realize the importance of continuing the commission. So that's kind of why I keep bringing that issue up, because I'm afraid that our work is going to get lost if we don't really document it.
That's excellent. Excellent. And then when we have the discussion with the delegate, you know, about that, that's one of the things. And that's one of the fears I had. Like, okay, so what do we do for the next 3 years? You know, we need to do things all the way along here. Perhaps there's an interim and a final each year. I don't know, but let's talk about that. But I'd like to keep we have a real good impetus and a real good we've done a lot of good stuff, and we need to report on it. And so we'll report issues in the June report, and then we'll come up with whatever recommendations the commission wants to get behind in the report towards the end of the year, hopefully by the end of November, so the legislature can look at it before the session starts. So the next bill, the agenda, I think, unless there are any more questions on this bill. So okay, you got the next bill up. So, all right. So let's take a look at this. Ainsley, you want to explain this a little bit?
Yeah, I just, this is a bill that requires the Department of Labor to administer GED tests in both English and Spanish. I don't know if that's currently happening inside, but this just expands that GED for people who speak Spanish.
So that's a good question, John or Rochelle.
Yeah, that came out of our office, as a matter of fact. Yes, I can speak to that. So previously, the GED was available. You know, there are 4 parts to the GED. The language access portion of the GED was only available in English in order to pass it. The regulation change, or the bill that passed, allows that particular piece of the GED to be taken in Spanish, which now allows all 4 portions to be taken in Spanish, or for there to be a mix of Spanish or English pieces taken. Whereas in the past, it was, you know, the first 3 pieces, and I'm drawing a blank on what the names of them are at the moment.
Right.
But that particular regulation allows for each and every single piece of that GED to be taken in Spanish, and to mix and match the languages in which it's taken.
Just for information, and correct me if I'm if anybody knows that I'm being slightly inaccurate here. The GED has been given in Spanish for years, as well as English, and there were even some French versions in Canada, because Canadians use the GED as well, or at least they had. And so this is taking something that exists. It's not creating something brand new. It's creating more opportunity, as far as I'm concerned.
It also says the bill is supposed to study the feasibility of offering the test in other languages. I don't know which other languages.
I think it's only available in French otherwise.
Yeah, we actually have been exploring having the GED translated into literally any language that a taker would like to take it in. We've actually got some preliminary estimates for the cost, and it's right around $2.5 million per language that we would like to have that added in or translated to. Again, just to put a dollar cost to some of the concerns that came up. And yeah, Stephen, if you, and I'm not sure if this is exactly true, but I believe that in the past, the RLA portion of the GED had to be taken in English. And that's the part that's the big change. Now that piece can be taken in Spanish to complete the GED, whereas the other 3 portions could be taken in Spanish. Those Spanish-speaking persons would still need to take the RLA. It's the reasoning through language arts portion. They had to take that in English, but that's now changed. That's a huge win for that population.
And that should probably not be anything that costs much, because the test is available through GED testing service to the state, and the state, you have the GED testing office in your agency in labor. So that should be a relatively easy thing to do. I mean, it
was all political. Yep. It's no additional cost at all. That decision was purely political.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, are there any more questions on this, on that bill? Okay, so let's go back to our agenda for, if we can put that back. Thank you, Ainsley. We looked at the interim report that well, we were talking about the interim report, and we have some things that we feel are still needed, and this comes from questions and discussions we've had with this committee before. We have some questions on program attendance and enrollment, some questions on waiting lists, school closure shutdowns, the data system for program management and evaluation, at least those 4 items. So we're talking about issues in an interim report. These are things that we would be talking about in our June report, at least for ABE, GED, and special ed. Higher ed has somewhat their own issues, and so does career tech. So let's talk about that. The report that we received from Rochelle, thank you, for our March, I think the deadline was March 28th. A number of us have read it and have some additional questions. So what I'd like to do is, at least, we don't want to take the meeting past 11 o'clock, but I'd like to have people raise questions that they've seen, or concerns, or commendations on any of these items. Let's start with program attendance and enrollment. So we have, I'm looking at the responses we've received. So I know a number of you have questions, so go ahead. And does anybody want to start off with some of the questions we have about some of the responses concerning enrollment and attendance?
Ainsley, it might be good if you can drop in the chat the stuff that
I'm
sent.
doing that right now.
Thank you.
Anne has her hand up. And do you want to speak?
Is there?
Yeah, just right off the and I did kind of a different like I kind of processed the numbers a little bit, and I had a question and a concern from that. The question was, when you talk about 240 days of education, are you talking about 240 days in the seat, or 240 days assigned to education as a job assignment, like 7 days a week? And the reason that really raised in my mind was because I aggregated some of these closure rates and did yearly averages and then 2-year averages. And when I added the labor plus DPSES closure rates, I was finding certain institutions like WCI and RCI had, 70%, 66%, closure rate. So you're talking about people who are maybe in school 1 or 2 days out of the week. And I was wondering, are they getting 240 weeks of education then if they're only in one day of the week? Or is it 240 days, like 7 days a week, but in reality, they're only getting 1 day of education per week? So that my concern is, how does that closure rate go up against the mandatory student rate, especially when we have institutions where it is so egregiously closed?
So
that's a really good question. I'm not sure if that is a Danielle or a Rochelle question. That's a good question. Yeah, I would assume that it's 240 days in the chair. It's not just 240 days, because we have some institutions that, like, say for instance, an institution is not open for 6 months. Does that mean they only get 3 months of school? Or does that mean they're in school for 3 years because you need 240 actual days in the seat? That's a really good question.
I think the intent of the law was that people spend that time in school, 240 days.
the original law, the 120, it's 100, it was 120 calendar days. So meaning that that was like 3 months, right? Or well, for total, that included weekend, that included holidays, that included everything, as long as they were actually getting paid for those days, right? So basically it didn't, after 4 months, your 120 was done. They were actually also counting even days that they weren't in school too. Like
Wait,
if
so
they
if you were in school, 120 days has passed, you've been paid for all those days, but you've only been in school a third of the time, that would still count as 120 days?
Well, if you're not in school, you're not paid. Now, if school is closed down and canceled, and that is not your fault, they're getting paid for those days. So technically that counts into that now 240. So that's actually an issue that I've raised with some of the ones that have been shut down a lot, is that after that 240 days, no matter whether they're actually getting in a butt in a seat, now they are getting other stuff. They're getting proxy work, they're getting this, they're getting that. So the argument is technically they're getting paid to be in education. You're paying them and you're giving them work. So technically that is part of the 240. And that is where our IIs are arguing, especially the ones who don't want to be mandatory, right? They are basically saying, no, I'm doing work. You're giving me work. You're paying me. Why wouldn't that count? So see, we get into like law issues then. And so we would literally have to say, you're not a button seat, so we're not paying you and we're not giving you work. So that doesn't count. So if they get a tablet, technically that counts, right? Like, because that's school.
Well,
So it sounds like the answer to Ann's question is they'll be out in less than a year, regardless of how many.
Regardless of how many days
closures
are
and things like
actually
that. Yep.
correct. Because that closure date, yes, it's a closure, meaning the school is closed, but that doesn't mean that they're still not getting something, right?
Yeah. And we could agree, I think, that getting something like packets is not really education.
Correct, but it still unfortunately counts, yes.
Delegate, I smell a kind of a possible recommendation right now from this group. I mean, we really, as educators, many of us are, that we cherish the amount of time of contact with the teacher, and that's really what education is about. Any thoughts on this?
Oh yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. Okay, I really would like to say that I am absolutely, without equivocation, appalled, but I'm not going to say that. Yeah, give them something to do. All right, whether we folks are incarcerated or not, everyone is incarcerated in public schools. If what you're getting are packets or something else to do, and we're calling it education, that is another crime happening all over. It says you're not important enough for us to really educate you so that you can think out of this box or any box, or even the box that got you in this box at all. That is awful, but we're going to pay you. We're going to give you something to do. All right. I know I'm preaching, so I'm going to stop now.
Yeah, I want to get the microphone.
We really talk about recommendations. This is something we've got to put our brains and figure out what else we can do to that end. I don't know whether it's an additional legislature.
It would have to be.
And yeah, I'm saying, talk to us. There's 3 of us that are on this committee. That if we're not coming up with something to give the 3 of us that we can bind, then we might as well not come to any of the meetings. We might as well not send anyone here if we can't come. That's a waste of time. If when we finish, we haven't fixed this issue, And we didn't need an extension. We don't need the time we had in the first place.
I would love to work with you, Delegate, on figuring.
I'm gonna,
Let's do that. I am an educator. Okay. Okay, 50 some years of
I
doing
might have
it.
DPSS behind my name, but I'm educator at heart.
Okay. No. That is it's just reprehensible on any level. On any level.
Okay, Delegate, I'm gonna play antagonistic on this for the sake of this discussion, not because.
You know, Rochelle Rubin has her had her hand up for a while.
What's gonna happen, however, is a bill cost is gonna be, if we were to put in the recommendation, let's say you submitted a bill to clarify and say seat time and however we define that, somebody's going to come up with a tag on what's this going to cost. And so somebody, the public safety, they're going to say, well, it's going to cost X amount every day. And this person is not going 240. They're going to now go 3 times that because of the closures, and it's going to cost this much more. So I'm just putting that in there as what's going to happen in a discussion on the bill, because it might come back saying, well, this bill could cost $1 million. And that's not completely true, because they weren't in school, they'd be assigned to something else and getting paid something, but generally, you know,
can you explain that to me? If they're getting paid anyway, then
well, if they're not assigned, they're not paid.
What am I missing here?
So I can
go ahead.
I know what you're saying, Steve.
Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
So basically, what others in my department would possibly say, if possibly that would come out, is the reason why we're shut down is because of lack of officers. We all know that. That is not a secret, right? So if we have to say now at 240, you have to have a butt in a seat, then in order to get to that, that is people, that is staff, that is actual officers, additional pins, that is
$30 million a year is
right.
Probably what it ends up costing.
And I hate playing that devil's advocate, right? But it's unfortunate.
But I'm looking at it a little differently, Danielle. I'm looking at it not so much, okay, you might say you can't, the staff thing is going to be difficult, but people get paid to do programs. They get assigned to MCE where they get the most per day, Maryland Correctional Enterprises. They get a maintenance job and they get, I don't know what it is, but they get so much a day to go push a broom, mop the floor, you know, whatever. They get assigned to kitchen. They get, so you can look at the scales. There are scales that exist for that, and you can see what it costs. So you're saying the school gets this much, and you're going to have to continue to pay this guy or gal, you know, 3 times that, because they're most of the time they're not in school, let's say. So that would be the cost. I'm not thinking of the staffing. I'm thinking of this daily stipend for payment for programs.
No, that payment actually stays consistent. That's not where the additional cost comes from. Like, you got to ask so the question is, why aren't they in class?
Right.
Because we don't have the staff. Why don't we have the staff? Because correctional officer wages are 50% of the market for what that position calls for. So how do we get people hired? We need market wages for correctional officer staffs, which $30 million a year. Like, if you keep asking the why, you'll eventually get to the root cause of the problem. And that's my back of the napkin 30-second math. But I also wanted to point out a thing that we're not talking about is the fact that this only affects negatively those who we mandate to go through this process that do not want to be there. So understand that any person that is incarcerated that wants to continue their education can stay as long as they need to stay to finish their education. So Delegate Pasteur, the only ones that won't complete are the ones who didn't want to be there from day one and don't want to be there at all, and they voluntarily exit.
Rubin has had her hand up for a long time.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Rochelle.
Sorry.
Thank you. Just a few things I wanted to raise to the conversation. I think first and foremost, there is no substitute for first instruction. So the outcomes have relevance beyond just the number of days or butts in seats, so to speak, but also to GEDs, right? Because if they're not fully prepared, we can't get them across the GED line. One of the things, I think the shutdowns are one. I think staffing is another, but it's just also, I think, a couple of things. If I saw someone put in the JCI, that shutdown is not related to staffing. Those shutdowns that they've experienced this year were not related to staffing. They were related to something completely different. And in correctional education, I think that those were electrical. Those were the blackouts that happened in the Jessup area. And that impacted MCIJ, JCI, those institutions in that area. And that was just this year. So last year they had no shutdowns. This year they did. So I think getting to the root of just the issues and the impediments that sometimes are specific to correctional education that impact the educational programming. Just as a toss out there, one of the things we're investigating is a virtual academy, right? We feel we've tested it through our transitional programming, where we are able to move incarcerated individuals through a self-paced program, right? That could help us with the wait list. We currently are serving about 4,500 annually. We feel like in a pilot, we could move that up to 6,500 at full scale implementation. We could serve approximately 10,000. However, that's going to cause for our infrastructure to change, right? Because one of the things we're noticing through the pilot is that while it's self-paced, if the student has a question, we don't really have the staffing to say, okay, you can go to this person, this instructor to get it. But if we were able to do that, build it into the platform a little bit more, have office hours, do live teaching, we feel like that is an answer to some of what you're seeing additional to the staffing, because it's, and no disrespect, it's been a year and we haven't, 2 years now, and we haven't been able to solve that through staffing. So I don't know that staffing is the be all end all solve.
Could I just make a comment? I teach at JCI. I was there on Tuesday, as I always am. And I happened to run into the teacher who teaches before me, who is a GED math and science teacher. And she was telling me, for example, that it would be a great aid if they could access Khan Academy, which some of you may know, I assume people in education, which has beautiful, really good short videos. Obviously, they can't have them on the internet, but isn't there some way those could be downloaded? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And to start a self-paced program, that sounds like a very ambitious thing when there are already resources out there. And she was bemoaning the fact that those aren't available to the students.
She's actually wrong, and I'm sorry that she's wrong about that. Khan Academy is on the tablets, and we would be using our tablets to do the virtual programming. So we're not reinventing the wheel. It's already there at our disposal.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. But I will say that, and then I've done I've got Khan Academy, and I go on and play with it sometimes to teach myself. And I get stuck even with the video, and there's nothing like having a teacher when you do get stuck. And that's the limitation of all these programs, including the excellent stuff that it's fun to do these classes. At least I do. I get fun doing it with Khan Academy, but it's not complete, but to have it available is terrific. And I'm a real big proponent of having a holistic concept with technology and face-to-face instruction together. So you can do exactly what you're saying, Rochelle. People can be working on stuff and sending questions and getting answers, and when places are closed. I don't think there's any danger to security that people can take tablets and laptops back if everything's firewalled. And I have had experience with correctional officers at Howard County when we brought in laptops that did not have internet. Some of the program people said, "Oh, we can't let them have it because they'll take those cords that they use, they can charge it in their cells. They'll fight with them." And the correctional officer said, told me, the head of security told me, "Who cares? They do that all the time with their iPod cords. We just take the stuff away from them when they act out. So there's no excuse that people, if we have the resources, that there shouldn't be a way we can't distribute them and have them working." But anyway, I just think technology is a good partial answer to this. And I'm glad you brought that up, Rochelle. We might run out of time without getting through our whole agenda here. Can you put the agenda back up, Ainsley? I think this discussion is terrific, though. We've come up with
Anne has her
item
hand
that
up.
is an issue that we all want to do something about, and we're going to come back to seat time and all that with mandatory ed means. So waiting lists. The questions on waiting lists, school closures. Well, we've already talked about school closures and shutdowns to quite a bit of extent here, and then this issue of data system for program management and evaluation. I know some of the people here have had questions about that, and I want them, rather than me raise them, I want people to make some comments, like Ann did earlier on the issue of 240 days. The idea here is that we collect data on a daily basis, on a real-time basis, and use them for program planning for students, but also for program evaluation. And the question is, and we have answers here for a lot of the questions we put to Rochelle. Are we collecting data in real time? Are we is it being looked at in a central office situation? And so the people who are responsible for, let's say, academic education can look at that and talk to the teachers and the principals out in the field about, keeping current and keeping, making changes necessarily as you look at the everyday data. So are we doing a good job with this data collection? Are we doing the job we need to do? What kind of things can we do to improve? That's kind of in a nutshell what this is about.
Well, I'm happy to jump in if no one. Okay, I think we're doing a reasonable job with what we have at our disposal. So for correctional education, we have essentially one IT person that serves all of the institutions across the state for correctional ed, and that's in help. He's built the database. And it's however many years old from when he originally built it. And then he also serves as the point person for all technological issues for correctional education across the state of Maryland. So that's one area in which I feel
what is his name? I'm sorry.
Jim Bowden.
Okay.
So that's one area in which I feel like there could be room for us to grow and improve. And I think when I think about some of the software and database collection systems that are available to us, we can think about how we improve on our current CE main and CE student database and collection system. It does allow us to do certain things, to see across, for the teachers to have access, for students to have access, right? And so that makes it interesting. But what we would like to do to see the data in real time is not have to build so many in-house charts, which is what we do. We've had to build our own GED monitoring chart. We've had to build an in-house occupational monitoring chart. We have to build our in-house leadership board. And so those are places that we would like to grow. So I'm not being a pain. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to it. I'm not being a pain when I say it literally takes us with our existing system. It can take me a month to gather the data to the extensive deep dive that you ask for, because I'm literally having to go to different places to gather that and pull that in some of we don't have a very streamlined, fluid system currently.
And I'm glad you said that, and I have a couple questions. And I guess my concept is, and if I look at the public school system, although I work most of my time in corrections education, I would expect the teacher, the principal, to know what, the enrollment, who's there today, be able to tell me how many closures they had, why they had closures, if any. And I'd expect the principal to be collecting data in order to go in and evaluate the effectiveness of programs in terms of achievement and completions and what have you. And even I mean, I don't want to go in a deep dive for us, even in terms of teacher annual evaluation. I mean, but we're not talking about that here. We're not going to do a deep dive on going in and evaluating teachers. We want to see that the data is ready and available. I don't think from your explanation that you gave that I mean, you said it took you a month to get some of the answers, and I think some of those things we ought to be able to find right away if we had a robust system. In other words, you're saying that improvements need to be made, and I think maybe this committee ought to take a good look at this collection system. We have enough people who have been involved in various kind of data collection over in their life. I mean, Ann is terrific with data analysis and all that, and educators and come up with some recommendations about this system. So if Jim Bowden I'd love to. We actually had some discussions about having a demonstration of what this system does. We could set up a Zoom, and if Jim could hopefully, show us how it works, and we can ask questions, and we could get at how are waiting lists collected, who's watching over these waiting lists, because we got possibilities. There's a waiting list, maybe shifting people to another institution, where there is instruction available, et cetera. So I think improvements, it's safe to say from what we've seen from your answer and the paper answer we got from you and this discussion that the data collection system needs to be improved. And we haven't even talked about its interface with public safety's data collection system, where we have individual programs are being planned by case management, and education has to interface. So that data system should work that way too. You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of questions here that I think we should raise as issues, and maybe eventually recommendations at the end of the year for improvement. A low-hanging fruit, let's say, possibly, or because this could be cost here too. Then that's another issue. Delegate, in your experience as an educator, what are you looking at it in educational data collection? I mean, you have a viewpoint that would be very helpful here.
Sure. And even if you look at the restorative practices schools bill that I wrote, you'll see it all laid out, what we now want folks to submit so that we can take a look. We're looking at absenteeism. So it would be, if you transfer that, how many days not in a classroom. I looked at Ann's comment online about people who are out and whether they've met their days and they've asked to come back, whether it was denied or whatever. So collecting all of that kind of data, we should have that. And maybe what Rochelle is talking about with Ms. Bowden, if we can get that kind of information. So we're seeing who's coming. John talked about those who are mandated and not wanting to. So taking a look at that as well. We look at pass, fail, not just when it's time for a state test. We're asking that we call them benchmarks along the way, how people are progressing, because I do know sometimes we get to the end and then we realize that the student didn't have a clue or wasn't getting what he or she needed. So then we've wasted time, because we could have figured out, if we were doing benchmarks, we could figure out what was needed and be able to go back and support that student before getting to the end and seeing a swath of people who are not passing. And then people thinking the programs are not working. So doing all of those things at interval. But I have it laid all out in that bill, which I hope Monday won't be signed. But it is laid out, and I think we need to be doing that. Ms. Rubin, are you saying then that, and others, that we wait pretty much until the end to see if they pass or how they do? What are we doing as on interval levels? That's my point.
So for example, with the GED, and I think what you've laid out is excellent. For example, with the GED, we are testing them to see, are they scoring at the ASC 1, 2, 3 level? Obviously, if you're at the 1 level, it's going to take us some time to get you to passing the GED. But we would like to have and incorporate it into a functional database system where we're able to determine if upon enrollment, we have some rules. When do we give the I-ready? Right? Is someone coming to us able to pass the GED right off? And then there are other things that we have to, factor into that, right? If they're going to get the ASC 4, they get diminution credits, right? But oftentimes, some of our IIs don't want to take the GED and pass it, because if they take it and pass it, then they can no longer get the diminution credits for the ASC 4. So there are some components that we need to negotiate, and being able to benchmark along the way in a meaningful way, a click of the button would really help us to do that.
I think we we should take a look at the benchmarks you have in your bill. So maybe if Ainsley could send out the bill and see, because if those benchmarks, we should really be considering them and see how they relate to the educational situation. Because I know what Rochelle's talking about, that we test periodically, test adult basic education or whatever to find out where people are, and often it gives a skill array as well, so the teachers can focus. But but when you're having so many closures, I mean, just where are we going? I don't know. I do see another. I mean, we've already decided that this issue of 240 days is something we need to look at legislatively and maybe have more discussions. And so that's a recommendation we'll probably end up making. Certainly a big issue. And I do see the data collection system as a big issue, and we can include that with technology. And we need more discussions to define our issues and problems, what we are accomplishing and what we need to accomplish. So I've got 2 issues right here, right now, that could very well end up being recommendations in our report. So I want to do a time check here, if we could, on Ainsley, where are we with our agenda?
We are over time.
Well, I know we're over, but yeah,
but let me put up the agenda again. Let's see. And I think Anne makes a great point, and I think that the issue with DIM credits, really, we should look into, because we know that it is super important for people. That's a big motivator for entering programs and completing programs. And so if they can't earn those credits anymore, why would they pass their GED? So I think that we should definitely look into that as well.
Yeah, that's been a problem for all my life in correctional education. People would flunk the test on purpose to stay in school. And I mean, it's because they need to get paid, or they need to get good days, and for whatever. I'm more concerned about people who want to be in school and can't, or maybe, for whatever reasons. But so we're identification of who is eligible for GED. Do we do a complete job of that is the question. Are we able, with the data we collect when people come into the system, through self-testimony, are we able to pick up, I know Dollar has connections with all the county school systems to get information and data on high school completion, right, Rochelle? So is that, how well are we doing that particular? I want to just say we can go another 5 minutes or so, maybe, if that's okay. I don't want to take anybody else's, time past that time. What the identification of who's eligible for GED. So how are we doing on that? Are we really capturing everybody?
I think we're doing a relatively good job with that. One of the things we've discussed, though, is moving around the I-ready and taking a closer look as to who's ready. And we've been discussing the TABE cut score, right? That's not really, I think that was an internal thing that was done in correctional education to say, well, we need one of our students to score at this level to be able to move forward. But we're finding that sometimes, and as a matter of fact, because we had to do some of these alternative GED testing initiatives because of the shutdowns, we found that there were folks who felt like they were ready to take it. And if they've passed, let's say they've passed one or two, and we say, okay, go ahead and try. And they actually passed, right? So now we're looking closely at those determinations upon enrollment. What does that need to look like for us to really get a solid understanding of who's ready to test, who's not, what supports they need, and getting more people through the process.
Okay, all right. And our next, our letter C, number of spaces available for ABE GED program. I guess the question is, are all our classes totally enrolled? I mean, when we do have them, and what is the possibility of expansion? I mean, we have teacher shortages too, and some cases we have vacancies, so that might be an issue. But and then a correctional officer problem. I mean, that you can have the space, but if there's no school, so that's another issue. But I guess the whole thing is, how do we expand? The question is, how do we expand to get as many people in school as possible who want to go or need to go? And what can we do on that issue? I know it becomes a college issue too. The higher education people are looking at space issues, like getting trailers at one of the institutions, or alternative times for programming. So we have so many people who could benefit from education. What is our capacity? What could be our capacity? So.
And may I ask one question here?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm looking at the credits. Why would they take the classes once or want to pass the GED and then they start getting credits? Is there someone not on this meeting, but at some point with whom I can speak so I can get an understanding? Because I have notes here. I have some thoughts about ways to accommodate the needs and desires of those people who could pass the test early on coming in. But I need to ask questions to make sure that what I'm thinking is relevant, which might then move people to take courses, to do class time, and also the GED. But I don't want to go through it now. I just need someone I can bounce all of this off of on our own separate time. Who on here may I talk to, make arrangements for us to have a Zoom or something?
Well, can you give us an example of a question you have?
Yes. Okay. So if you don't want to pass the GED because now you don't get your DEM credits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Are there ways to get new incentives, new opportunities, new points, or something additional so that it becomes a benefit to when you come in, you don't lose anything. You come in and you can, and you know that you can pass it up front, or when you get through it, something that's out of the box right now.
Well, it could be getting into a college program.
Yes. See, this might be something that has to be legislated. I don't know. But if it is, we can do that. Because anytime we can show my good friends in Annapolis that there's rhyme and reason and worth to doing something, and that will also help change culture. That's what restorative is, about changing culture. All right. So that's where we need to be thinking as well. And that goes back full circle to where we started, why this is extended and why we start giving reports now, so people can see that we are thinking about ways not only to get GEDs and education, but changing culture. But I need to talk. I I have so much that's jumping around. You all are so fabulous. I have so much jumping in my head. But this is not the time for me to be.
Well, there's three basic things. I mean, it's college, and then you can get into career tech, and then you can get into Maryland Correctional Enterprises. That doesn't capture. There should be more opportunities, more incentives, more something to change the culture. But somebody doesn't want to go onto a waiting list because then they don't get any time or get any DIM credits. So I mean, it's an excellent question.
I think this also comes down to diminution credits and stuff is going to have to be a conversation with commitment, our case management, talking about that sort of thing, because anything that all revolves around legislation. So that's something that definitely we can get connected with. I can get our who we need to get on, and I'll talk to our legislative team. We can get a meeting together, delegate. So really,
that would be great, because I see some possibilities here that don't have very large fiscal notes.
Right.
We worry about that first, but there are ways to, just like restorative, they gave me this humongous fiscal note. And I said, okay, well, that's out the question. But I knew how to backpedal it. And so that note went down, and here we are. But we have to be able to talk about it. I don't know enough about what each of you do to share what I know, and I need you to talk to me.
Well, we could schedule a Zoom just on this topic. I mean, I think a lot of people would really want to enter into this discussion as part. We can do it as a separate meeting and set up a time. So, delegate, if you want to give us some times when you'd like to talk about this, and we can open it up to anybody.
Well, if you will all give me to come with some dates, because I'll try to work this around your schedule, as long as Ann promises to be on there. Ann, are you listening? Thank you.
I am. I've been chatting in the sidebar
voice. Did you hear me jump right into that school teacher voice? Ann, are you listening? Because you are the prickly pin, as Paul Laurence Dunbar used to say, the stinking milkweed of discontent. And you always need that person in your
compliment.
That was a compliment.
I'll take that as a compliment.
It is a compliment. I love it that people call me that. I love that. Well, what about this? And how about that? And why? That's how you close gaps.
I love the stinking milkweed thing because it attracts monarch butterflies. So, I mean, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, Steve, just let me know, and I'll make sure that me and whoever we need to get on to talk about how that works with different felony convictions, sentence lengths, that type of thing.
Angel and I'll set out some dates, put out some dates possible for this, and so we'll talk about DIM credits and culture. We'll call it more than just DIM credits. We'll call it restorative justice,
incentives, or
innovation, or whatever you want to call it. So
all of you, I need you to just talk to me and fill my head. And yes, thank you.
I must say, Ann has her own little prickly thing there, that little baby running around, and every so often she disappears. So that's part of what's going on.
She does. She does. That baby keeps Ann hopping. All right. That's my baby.
He usually hangs out here too. He likes to listen to everyone.
I'm gonna draw this to a close. I mean, we have not finished, that's for sure. We've just started with some of these discussions.
John
so we'll come back on these discussions. We meet every 2 weeks. We're going to set up a separate time to talk about the issues that are brought up by the delegate here, and I'm going to be sharing within a week or two a possible outline of the interim report and the issues that we could report on. So if there's any with
John,
any other quick discussions here, but we need to give people time to get back to their regular jobs.
Steve, John has his
super quick, 10 seconds. Just wanted to say that I know that we have some folks that are in the other work group that are very passionate about the whole conversation around but I think of Gordon. I can't remember Gordon's last name, but I want to make sure that he gets invited as well. He provided some great information about that. But also, will this meeting be scheduled as a prison education delivery reform commission meeting? Separate. Just curious.
I think we put it out to everybody and say this is the ABE GED group had a discussion. Delegate Pastor has an issue she wants to discuss. We're going to create a special meeting and invite everybody to participate from the three groups from the overall commission. Okay.
Fantastic. As long as it's through the commission, we have different mandates internally at Labor that we have to follow depending on who's calling the meeting. So
yeah, I'll call, if I have any authority, I'll call it a commission meeting, and then it's
Well, I have no authority, so don't ever listen to me. I stay in legislative timeout. So
Yes, you do, ma'am. Come on.
everybody on this commission and these advisory groups has authority to raise issues, and that's the way I look at it. So
perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so I really appreciate everybody today, and I'm going to go back over the video because I just couldn't keep taking notes on this, and it's great stuff and real issues. Thank you all for participating. I appreciate Rochelle coming on, and you're welcome to come to any and all meetings. So I will call it the end of the meeting if unless anybody else has something earth-shaking to say.
Just to say Rochelle needs to be there. Okay, that's all I want to say.
Okay, all right. So 2 weeks from today, and we'll work out a date for this discussion on dim credits and restorative justice. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Delegate Pastor, do you have at some point to talk about that the restorative practices bill?
I always have time to talk about restorative practice.
We're gonna make sure.
Are you serious? The question is, how much time do you?
Oh my gosh.
Let's make sure everybody has a copy of the restorative bill, okay?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And just know that I am trying to get that in some way infused into our juvenile centers.
That's actually why I wanted to talk to you.
Yes, I really want to do that.
Okay, and I want to talk about it.
Okay, thank you, Danielle, because you know I love you, Danielle.
Yeah.
All right.
You too.
Adios.
Bye-bye.
Adios.